All right, can you guys hear me now? Give me a thumbs up if you got me. All right. Thank you, Casey. Yeah, I actually have a beer in my fridge right now called a Blondie. I don't understand what's going on with the audio here, guys. I am sorry. It is really weird. I have a audio issue going on. I will figure that out. My apologies. All right, take two, everybody. Thank you very much for your patience here on everything as well, because I know I got a late start here due to the fact that I had to work late as well. All right. Take two. All right, everyone, thank you very much for coming on. Welcome once again to the next episode, Red Delta Project Podcast. As always, Matt Schifferly, founder, Red Delta Project. Today, we're discussing more fundamental principles about health and fitness to give you more power, control, and freedom in your fitness journey. So we're talking about differences between compound and isolation exercises. And I almost feel like it's a time machine answering these questions, because this is something that's been coming up a little bit more over the past couple of weeks for some strange reason. It's like people are like, look at this video, and someone's saying isolation exercises are the only thing that ever works and compound movements are dumb. And then someone else is like, do you see this other article? Someone said the opposite. What are we, in 1990 again? Because this is the stuff that was all over the place when I got my start in fitness. People were debating back and forth, isolation versus compound. And this is a classic symptom of the debates that we have in our fitness culture that ultimately divide a lot of opinions, but fundamentally don't go anywhere. Regardless of what side you get stuck on, whether you're team compound or team isolation, you're screwed either way. Because a lot of things, it's like, well, both are good, both have their pros and cons. And if you don't understand the pros and cons, then you don't know how to make the best decisions for which one is best for your circumstances. And you get stuck in a dogmatic trap where you think this is the only one way I should be going. And you're basically shackling yourself. It's like trying to run a marathon with handcuffs around your ankles, sort of thing. It's like, it doesn't matter if you're right, you're going to be stuck. So isolation and compound. Now, to be clear, it shouldn't matter what you're doing for the exercises, right? Fundamentally, muscles are really simple when it comes to building muscle and strength, right? You've got every muscle, skeletal muscle, not smooth muscle like in your digestive system or cardiac muscle, but you have an origin point and you have an insertion point. And the muscle contracts to bring the two together, like a band, like a rubber band coming together. That's it. That's all your muscle knows. And aside from that, it's how much force it's creating to bring the two together and how long, time and tension. That's the only variables your muscles understand. They don't know what kind of exercise you're doing. They don't know what kind of equipment you're doing. They don't care about your routine and your program and exercise and isolation compound. It doesn't know. It shouldn't really matter. But of course, we'll do a couple of exercises and we'll be like, all right, I feel it in my biceps when I do this curl, but then I do pull downs, I don't feel it in my biceps. So when we have these perceptive differences, we get lost oftentimes thinking, okay, the difference is created by the exercise, or the difference is created by band versus dumbbell versus, is it a curl, or what kind of curl, seated curl, band curl? We create all these things, but the reality is the difference is created by you. You're the one creating the difference. You're the one who's telling your biceps to do something different when you go from isolation to compound. It's created in your brain, because ultimately your muscle behavior boils down to the signals your brain gives your muscles. Equipment and the exercise you do doesn't do anything to your muscles. It doesn't tell your muscles anything. It's your brain that says, hey, quadriceps, I need you guys to contract. Whether you're running, walking, on the leg press, leg extension, or whatever. So the lesson we want to take is when we feel a difference between isolation and compound exercises, we want to be asking ourselves, why am I doing something different with my muscle one way or another? If I do straight arm pull downs, I'm like, wow, I feel that in my lats, but then you go and do pull ups and you don't feel it all. What are you doing different? Is your shoulder position off? Is your body position off? Are you just not squeezing your lats? What are you doing different that's creating the difference? And if you can figure that out, then you're going to greatly enhance any exercise you do because you're improving your tension control. You're improving your neuromuscular proficiency and therefore enhancing the effectiveness of every exercise you ever do with that muscle. So it's not a question of which exercise is best. It's how can you make all of your exercises better. And when you do that, you're going to be a hell of a lot more free to choose and use whatever you have on hand or whatever you like to do and get better results all the way. So when we're talking about the use of isolation, we also want to make sure that we're not trying to isolate, but more of focus, right? This is one of the great things about quote, isolation exercises on suspension straps, on like TRX or the NOSC systems and stuff like I recommend down below in the description, where if we do bicep curls on straps, we're still leaning back. We're still engaging our back. We're still getting our traps and rhomboids and lats engaged and the shoulders and the forearms and stuff, as well as the glutes and the hamstrings, or at least it should be. It should be still engaged. We don't want to isolate because the amount of force going through our body is going to be mitigated by how much we have a relaxed neuromuscular system. If you turn muscles off, you're effectively cutting off and short-circuiting their neural signal going to the actual muscles you want to be training. So if you're trying to isolate your abs, for example, and turn off your hip extension, hip flexors, your quads and so on, you're actually decreasing the amount of tension you can put in your abs. But once you get everything along the front side engaged, now you can have more force going through your entire flexion chain and your abs will have potentially much more attention to them. So that's one of the reasons why a lot of people will say compound movements are best, because the more muscle you include in an exercise, the more tension each of those muscles can potentially transfer from one another and more force in general. But when we isolate and we shut things down, that's kind of dimming down everything. It's a suppression mechanism. And you can't necessarily isolate your muscles in such a way. You suppress the activation in one area of your body, you're going to suppress it in a domino effect. But it also goes the opposite way too. You enhance the amount of contractile force in your legs, and that just goes through the rest of your body as well. That's why a lot of times when people are talking about, I want to be stronger in one area of the body, coaches will say, well, make sure you're contracting and using all of the other areas of your body. Therefore, we're not so much talking about isolation as we're talking about focused approaches. So we're moving primarily with one main muscle group, but everything else is still engaged. The other point that we want to make sure that we're addressing too is that a lot of times people on team compound will say, well, compound exercises are the best. You do one exercise, you get all these great muscles. You don't have to fragment the body up, which takes a lot more time and energy and stuff, which is a fair point. However, that is assuming we have good neuromuscular proficiency to all of the muscles engaged, which almost never happens for the average individual. Usually gifted athletes and stuff will have that. But if you are saying like, I want my quads to be bigger and stuff, so I'm going to do lunges and squats. Well, that's going to be great if you have good tension control in your quads. But if you don't, all the lunges and squats and everything aren't going to do you jack squat, if you pardon the pun. It's not going to do you anything because your brain doesn't know that muscle's there. It's called neuromuscular amnesia, and it's very prevalent and it's very common. I would basically say everybody has it to some degree somewhere in their body. So when we are looking at a muscle group that is lagging, despite the exercise, like this exercise is supposed to be working this muscle. Yeah, it's supposed to be working it. But remember, exercises don't work muscles. Your brain works the muscle to do the exercise. It's not a chicken or the egg thing. The signal from your brain to your muscle comes first, then the performance of the exercise comes second. It's a follow the leader sort of deal. So if that signal just isn't there, nothing you do is ever going to work. It's just impossible. So one of the ways that you can more effectively improve the tension control in a muscle is to dumb down the technical requirements of the exercise, which means single joint movements, isolation stuff. This is another reason why isometrics is so powerful, because on a technical level, it requires so much less neuromuscular proficiency to make the muscle work ridiculously hard that a lot of times people find if I can't get a muscle to really work, then they go with an isometric single joint move, which is about as simple as you can possibly get. It improves that neuromuscular proficiency and tension control, and then that proficiency spills over into the more technically advanced exercises. But you can't just assume the technically advanced exercise or the compound movement is automatically making things ever work the way it's supposed to, because oftentimes it doesn't. It really doesn't. Like I do, someone's like, I'm doing push-ups forever, my chest isn't getting bigger. Yeah, you're having trouble engaging your chest. No amount of push-ups is ever going to help you. Let's, put our hands together, press the palms together, get the chest muscles engaged. Let's fire that sucker up. And then let's go over to this band and we'll do some chest flies and stuff and really try to get the pecs to work focused in a very basic way. Then once you feel like, oh, now I'm really starting to get the chest to work. Okay, now let's get that to carry over into your push-ups. So we'll do some flies. See how that feels? Good. Yeah. Okay. Now let's go over and do some push-ups, and we won't overload it. We'll just go on like a weight bench or something. And now let's do these push-ups and try to get it to feel the same way, because the pinnacle of this whole thing is to make the muscle feel like it's doing the same thing, regardless of if it's an isolated or compound exercise. Once you get there, you got something really special. You're using your muscles at a very high level of proficiency. And at that point, it doesn't matter what you do. You can do any exercise, use any tool, any workout, any program, whatever you like, and it's all going to work. It's all going to be effective. As long as you're making the muscle work progressively harder, it's going to get bigger and stronger from the exercise standpoint. Lifestyle and diet and everything else still comes into play. But once we've got that neuromuscular proficiency, everything you do works. But if you don't have that, then nothing will ever work. But isometric and isolated style stuff can help you re-engage and get those areas going. So if you have trouble engaging something or working on it, or like, I just can't get this area to really feel like it's working, then I would definitely recommend an isolated style approach. I mean, Arnold Schwarzenegger put it best. He's like, if you can't, feel your glutes or grow your glutes, work your glutes. Well, what if I can't build up my shoulders? Work your shoulders. Like, focus on that thing. Get it as much dialed in as possible, and then it'll carry over to everything else, and boom, you're off to the races. So it's not a question of like one is good, one is bad. It's each one is a tool for helping to develop your overall proficiency and power and ability to get what you want out of your workouts. Right? So hopefully that makes all the sense. Let's get to some questions here. We've got lots of great people on tonight. Everybody is here. We got Al Painter in the house, along with, of course, Lily and Jeremy watching as well. We got Michael, we got Ronald, and it's good to see everybody. I apologize again for the audio stuff. Casey Bond in the house, Zarati Karate. All right, let's get to some questions. Greg. Hey, Matt, what do you think of the idea of overcoming yielding isometrics? Like a hybrid sort of deal, like I discussed in my book on overcoming isometrics? Because overcoming isometrics, for those who don't know, so yielding isometrics and overcoming isometrics are two different disciplines of isometrics. A yielding isometric has a set amount of resistance. So think of like holding your arm out to the side with a dumbbell in it, right? You have a certain amount of weight in your hand, there's a certain amount of resistance on your shoulder, and you're holding that. And overcoming isometric is when you're applying force against an immovable force. So if I took like the ISO trainer from World Fit, and I pulled it upwards, with my hand, and I'm pulling against the strap, that is that's an overcoming isometric. That's a potentially theoretical infinite amount of resistance. With yielding isometrics, though, what ends up happening is you have a quantifiable metric. So it's like a 5-pound dumbbell. If I put a 10-pound dumbbell in my hand, then that's going to be more resistance. With this strap, you don't have that quantification. Of course, that's what Dragon Door's ISO chain helps to solve because it has the quantifiable metric there in the handle and audio feedback, so you know if you're pulling against the handle with enough force. So there is the ability to do both, of course, which I absolutely love. I call them hybrid isometrics. I guess here we're also calling them yielding overcoming isometrics. So with that, you have a set level of resistance you have to hold against, and you have something immovable that you can use. So one of the examples in my book, which is a fantastic exercise, is a hybrid pull-up. So what you do is you take an iso loop and you loop it around the base of like a pull-up stand. And so it's a couple feet off the ground. And then what you do is you grab onto the bar and you pull yourself up like you're doing a pull-up, but your feet catch the bottom of the strap, so you can't pull yourself up any higher. So you have your body weight, that's the yielding component, plus you can overcome that amount by pulling as hard as you can on the strap. Wonderful, fantastic way to really work the muscle extremely, extremely hard. Probably, I would say, the easiest way to work your muscles, bar none. Hybrid or overcoming yielding style isometrics are going to be the best way. I've done this with abs. There's a plank variation in the book too, where you put a ab belt or an iso loop around your waist and you hold a plank, and people are like, I can never get my abs to turn on. And then they do that and they're like, oh my God, my abs, oh geez, holy smokes, they're cramping up. You know, it's an amazing discipline. Very, very much a fan. Speaking of Al Painter, let's get to his question here. What do you think about a 20 to 10 or 2 to 1 kind of finisher, like 20 seconds to 10 seconds kind of finisher? Maybe 2 sets, 10 to 20, not necessary hit, just nonstop foundation movements, light load, keep the heart rate up. Absolutely. See, when it comes to finishing movements, we oftentimes like overthink these things. Like all you're trying to do is basically work the muscle, whatever's left. That's why we put it at the end of our grind style calisthenics workouts. You should already feel like the muscle is pretty well worked through the first 3 phases, particularly the strength phase. It's not quite all there, but you should feel like there's a little bit left and you're just draining it. So any kind of exercise that you can do in a format like that, like a 2 to 1 ratio or something, where you're moving and then you're holding or something, can really be a good way. And yes, isometrics with something like that can really help to really drain the muscle further. Like if you're doing push-ups and you get to the point where you can't do any more push-ups, and then you hold yourself off the floor a couple inches for just maybe another 10 seconds, because you don't need quite as much tension for a yielding isometric as for a dynamic exercise. So you're just basically draining whatever is left. It's a really effective finisher. Joe, how's it going, man? Hey, Matt, I hate cardio, but at the same time, I feel like it's a limiting factor for me, particularly for warming up for recovery between sets. Any advice to get past this? Hey, man, I'm right with you. I hate cardio too. And I'm a bike racer, or I was a bike racer. I haven't been in a race in quite a while. I would look at what other limitations you have. Now, keep in mind here, Joe, that your mitochondria take about 20 to 30 minutes, maybe not 30 minutes all the time, but there's a wall that people experience when they're doing something that has a high metabolic demand to it. Because that's all cardio is. It's not a particularly kind of exercise. It's just any kind of exercise that requires an energy output from your muscles that's high enough that you're creating that metabolic demand. So when we start doing high metabolically demanding exercise, what we do is we can rely on energy substrates to meet that demand. But the real powerhouses of our cells, the mitochondria, they're kind of like a cold engine on a January morning. They take time to ramp up, right? And it takes like 20 minutes on average, 15 minutes or so. So a lot of times when people do things like they go for a hike, they go for a bike ride or something, first 20 minutes always just feels like it's the hardest thing to do. I went for a backcountry ski hike last weekend. Last Friday. It was a 7-hour hike, damn near killed me. And the first hour is always the hardest, or first 20 minutes, because you're just like, oh my gosh, I'm just driving myself into the ground. I'm exhausted here, because your energy demand and your energy output of that mitochondria hasn't caught up yet. So you're going to feel like you're out of breath, like your cardio sucks, right? This is why if you're ever going to do something like a mountain bike race or something, you want to do some cardio, light cardio beforehand to ramp up your mitochondria. So when they say go, now your power output of your mitochondria matches your energy output. And now you're still out of breath, but it doesn't feel like it's a very limiting factor for you. So I think that's what's going on with your workouts, is especially if your workouts are fairly strength-based and stuff, you're just not exposing your body to enough metabolic demand long enough for your mitochondria to really ramp up. And as a result, you're going to feel that way. And you're probably just going to be that way unless you're doing some sort of more sustained cardiovascular activity, like going for a hike. The other thing to consider too is check out your breathing during your strength training. If you're doing your push-ups and you engage that Valsalva maneuver and you start breathing like this, blood pressure skyrocket, that's going to exhaust you no matter how good your cardio is. And I find a lot of times that happens. In Taekwondo, this would come across a lot where people would get so winded when they were doing free sparring. Like, I'm a marathon runner, I run 10Ks, my cardio is awesome, what's going on? It's because they get in the ring, and as soon as they start kicking and punching, they'd hold their breath, and then they'd be exhausted, and then their opponent would just run roughshod over them because they have no energy. And it's like, my cardio sucks. No, you're not breathing. Everybody's cardio sucks when you hold your breath to some degree. So I would look at that. So maybe stuff that doesn't require as much metabolic demand right away, something that's a little bit easier on the system, maybe some of those isolated exercises as I was talking about, and make sure you're breathing, and that should help with the cardio. The other thing too is, yeah, it's normal to be out of breath. It's normal to feel like you're kind of catching your breath. It's a workout. It's meant to be like that. Matt Tora. Hey, Matt, have you read Solitary Fitness by Charles Bronson? I have actually, but man, it's been a long time. It's been a it's at this point, I remember liking it, but I couldn't tell you anything about it. I mean, it's probably been 15 years since I read that book. I should read it again. But yeah, Charles, I mean, anytime you're getting experience from someone who's been in the trenches like that, that's a hell of a lot better than anything I can give you, because experience beats knowledge 9 times out of 10. Someone who's been to the edge and back, who's gotten their hands dirty in the trenches, has the experience, and experience is a hell of a lot better teacher than any amount of theory or research studies and all that sort of thing that is really making the rounds. Wild Honey. Hey, Matt, what kind of exercises can I do to get huge glutes? Huge glutes. First off, check out Brett Contreras. Brett Contreras is the glute guy. He's got lots of great stuff on social media and stuff, but he literally is like the ass man. He is known for that sort of thing. So I would go check out his stuff for sure. But the bottom line is we want to look at the functional capacity of your glutes. Basically, they do a lot of different stuff, and there's a lot of muscles in there. It's not just your glute maximus, it's your medius and your minimus, and even smaller muscles in there like your piriformis and stuff. Plus, your glutes are meant to work with your hamstrings. This is what, again, a lot of the times people are like, I want to isolate the glutes, don't turn on the hamstrings. Big hamstrings lead to big glutes and vice versa. You want them all working together. Also, coincidentally, whenever guys are like checking out glutes, like, oh, look at the backside on her, 9 times out of 10, it's not the glutes they're looking at, it's the hamstrings. When I know, I mean, from experience being one myself, but whenever I'm like, wow, she's got great legs, it's the hamstrings that stand out. And I mention that because it feels to me a little bit like we've got a little too much of this cultural Cardi B, Kim Kardashian thing going on where everybody's focusing on the glutes. And we really need to be looking at the glutes and the hamstrings and calves. We need the whole thing. So with that said, hip extension exercises, right? Particularly hip extension style bridges or reverse planks and stuff. The one that I really like is the one where your feet are up on something, your knees are bent 90 degrees, and you drive up with your glutes. But again, you want to make sure you've got good glute activation first. If you don't have good glute activation, nothing's going to work for you. So practice isometrically contracting your glutes. So take a bridge, a hip bridge, lie on your back, or you can do a table bridge or something like that. Get all the way up to the top, and squeeze the mother living hell out of your glutes like you're trying to crush a walnut between your cheeks. Practice this for 3 minutes every single day. You should feel a very big difference in how your glutes are responding to this within a week or two. Then your job is to use your glutes a hell of a lot more anytime you're using your legs. Walking, running, climbing stairs, your glutes should be turning on and firing and working hard all the time. And that's one of the secrets to really developing the glutes is you want to always be using your glutes, not just during a hip extension exercise, always, because that's what they're designed to do. So we want to get that neuromuscular proficiency with your glutes really fired up by practicing those isometrics every single day and then consciously using your glutes every time you're using your legs. Then it just boils down to the basics, right? Once you've got those engaged, hip bridges. I know a lot of people do things like they do the hip bridge with barbells at the gym. If you've got that, that's a big staple for the Brett Contreras crew. Lunges and squat variations. Lunges I'm a big fan of. I like the lunge though. Lunges I oftentimes find is easier for people to engage in the glutes. I'm not exactly sure why. I think there's just a little bit less of a stabilization factor or something front to back, but lunges for sure, and really, really work. Because the secret with the legs is they've got to work a lot harder than we think they do. Check out the micro workout that I put on last Monday, because I do a micro workout on the channel every Monday. And that is a huge killer leg workout. I won't tell you what it is. I want you to go watch the video. Check out the micro workouts playlist. But you do that, and that's going to be a big glute builder too, provided you have good activation in your glutes. Henry Reed in the house. Always good to see you, my friend. Hey, Matt, any tips for juggling health and fitness with a desk job? Hey, man, that's a tough one. That's a real tough one because your body's always being trained, and sometimes the desk is training you more than the pull-up bar. So here's what I would recommend is employ the micro workout strategies that I have in my latest book and try and pepper some activity throughout the day. And really, it does not take much. It really doesn't. Like stretch your arms up over your head and back and twist. Get like 10 squats when you go and to the water cooler or something like that. Try to get some activity peppered throughout the day, because I don't care how hard your workout is. I don't care how long it is. When you're only doing it once or twice a week or even once a day for 1 hour, it's nothing compared to sitting at your desk for 9 straight hours. So if we can get some sort of physical activity throughout the day, even if you're kind of lunging upstairs, like, oh, I got to go see Mary in accounting on the 2nd floor or something. And you go up those stairs and you kind of take big steps and stuff. That stuff goes a long way. We were meant to be active every single day. Try to do that. Speaking of Zarate Karate, how's it going? Hey, Matt, what are your thoughts on Combat Conditioning 3, Explosive Calisthenics? Very good. I think it's a fantastic book. It's wonderful. And I'm not just saying that because Paul Wade name-checked me in that volume in the section on dips. Combat Conditioning 3, or Explosive Calisthenics, is the more official title. I think that's a very needed book, because one of the biggest myths when it comes to developing explosiveness that a lot of people do is they do way too much volume. I'm like, I'm going to do 100 box jumps. I'm going to do 50 burpees and stuff. When what we really need to do is really low volume with a lot of focus and concentration and understanding the true fundamental nature of building explosive power. And that's what that book covers. It's a fantastic read. Highly recommend it. Let's see what else we got here. Cupcake Boy, love the screen name. Hey, Red Delta, I have a question. Could I do shoulder presses instead of pike push-ups? I assume shoulder presses with dumbbells already have a carryover to pike handstand push-ups. Absolutely. Fundamentally, you're doing the same thing either way. Like I was saying earlier, your muscles, if the movement pattern's the same, theoretically, the muscles should be doing the same thing. They should feel the same. That's one of those things that probably is going to always have some difference, just because open chain versus closed chain, one, you're kind of inverted versus upright. I mean, there's so many different things going on with your perception of the exercise that you're probably always going to have some difference there. But yeah, I would say definitely interchange them, go with whichever one that you like, because they're vertical pressing movements either way. Supplement engineer, hey man, is that stout or porter you're drinking? If so, what brew? Believe it or not, It's a fine vintage of Diet Coke. That is one of my few vices, everybody, is diet soda. I've been drinking it since I was a little boy. Well, not really a little boy, but that was always like the special thing. You know, you see this a lot when it comes to like food habits that people have into adulthood, is the habits we had when we were kids and the tendencies we had when we were kids carry over to adulthood. Like for me, like I can't imagine going out and eating fast food a whole lot because I never did. One of the rules in the family when I was growing up was we just don't do fast food. Like fast food was a very special treat, like your birthday or something like that. So when I go out to like Five Guy and get a burger and fry once in a blue moon, and then a friend is like, let's go do that. I'm like, nah, I did that last night. I don't want to do it again, kind of thing. So, but yeah, I grew up, diet soda was like a very special thing. That was like a Friday night kind of deal sort of thing. And it's just one of those habits I've carried over into adulthood. And yeah, it's one of the few vices, but it is a vice that I haven't really cut back on. I drink a lot more sparkling water now, actually, a lot of seltzer water than diet soda. I don't really drink a whole lot of, now that I think about it, I really don't drink a lot of diet soda now. It's more just sparkling water just because I like the bubble and the sweetness and stuff. But I do have some porter in my fridge, and we'll probably be having some of that on Saturday or Sunday when my Buffalo Bills play the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC playoffs. I'm probably going to need a couple beers for that game, win or lose. Matt. Hey, Matt. Still training with the iso chain. Absolutely. In fact, it's right here next. I know you can't see it, but it's right here, right next to me. I've been really focusing on a couple of back stability exercises with it. One of my personal things that I've always had trouble with is anything that has me bent over. I've never been able to really get comfortable and produce a lot of power. So what I've actually been doing is a lot of deadlift motions at the top of the deadlift. One of my favorite exercises with the iso chain, I learned when I was making the iso chain videos for Dragon Door, and it's the wrist curl exercise for the forearms. Wonderful exercise. I never even did it until I made the video. Like, make a video about this exercise. I'm like, oh, I never tried that. And I did it for the video. And I was like, wow, this thing is great. But it's a great exercise, not just because it works the grip, but because your entire posterior chain has to be turned on for it. So you're not isolating in the forearms, biceps, my back, my lats, my traps, everything's engaged, but there's no stress on my spine because all the force is still going vertically, and I'm loading my spine vertically rather than horizontally. Wonderful exercise. I love it. I've been practicing it every single day. So, and also the iso chain Facebook group is one of those areas I've been hanging out a lot. And it's interesting watching the development of the iso chain in culture, because when it first came out, nobody liked it. Everybody was very critical of it. And now that it's starting to get out there, people are buying it and using it and stuff. A lot of the posts in the iso chain Facebook group, it's like everybody's like, oh, now I get it. Oh, wow, this really worked. Whoa, I didn't think it was going to be this great, but it really is, and everything. So it's like kettlebells in the early 2000s. When they first came out, people were critical as hell until people get their hands on it and learn how to use it properly. And then there was a shift, and people were like, wow, this is the greatest thing ever. And I think the same thing's going to end up happening with the iso chain for sure. Cool fan. Hey, Matt, do you have any micro planting methods? So to speak, micro plating. What? Elaborate on that one for me, cool fan. Micro plating, you mean like small plates, like dinner plates? Or micro plating as in like a micro loading, small adjustments in resistance? Please elaborate down below. In the meantime, Ryan K. Hey, Matt, could you explain what fatigue to the central nervous system feels like after a good low rep workout? I feel like I'm in a light fog. Yeah, that's kind of part of it. And the light fog, the central nervous system fatigue, a lot of it just, if you did a heavy squat workout, excuse me, and then ran up a flight of stairs, how does that feel? Kind of like you're turning to lead. Like it's not just your muscles are lead, but there's this feeling like your whole body is heavy. Like you're just kind of not able to produce power and speed. You know, sometimes when you get good sleep and you're feeling good and you feel like you're light on your feet and everything, the opposite of that. That's kind of more of what central nervous system fatigue. It's kind of like your brain is like, muscles go, and the signal's going through your system, And your muscles, even if they're relatively fresh, are going, I don't quite feel it yet, kind of thing. And I'm drinking a lot because I still have a bunch of crud in my throat from COVID over New Year's. But that's what it kind of feels like. It's like fatigue, but it's a different kind of fatigue. It's like a systematic fatigue rather than just a muscular fatigue. G Toro, hey Matt, I'm getting pain in my right elbow when locking out of the top of push-ups, bottom of pull-ups, ring supported holds. Any tips on rehabilitations? Do I have to stop working out? Of course you don't have to stop working out. And very rarely does pain have to result in stopping of working out. But one is you want to do kind of take a look at that and have someone look at it if possible to make sure you didn't do any sort of structural damage in there. It's probably just a little bit of tendonitis or something like that. But simple, don't walk out. It's if you are doing an exercise in a range and there's a certain area that hurts, or if there's just a way you're doing it that hurts, don't do it that way. So let pain be your guide. Heat will speed things up because there's not really any muscle here, of course. So this area, any sort of healing and stuff to tendons, that's all synovial fluid and things like that, where you got to keep the area just moving lightly. Maybe warm up before your push-ups and stuff with some shadow boxing or punching the bag and stuff, and not extending the arm fully. Just get the blood flowing as well as you can into that area. That will potentially start the healing process. But yeah, let pain be your guide. Don't do things that hurt, and keep doing whatever you can without the pain. And if it certainly gets worse, definitely get it checked out by someone in person for sure. Victor G, hey Matt, always a great learning from you. Thank you very much. My question is, what do you think about workout motivation? Most exercise just to get hotter, absolutely. But the real essence of getting healthy is kind of lost. Hey man, whatever floats your boat, whatever you're going after. I used to know someone who had a lot of disdain for someone who's like, I want abs, and I want pecs, and I want a big butt, and I want to be hot and sexy and stuff. And he's like, no, you need to train for function. You need to be an athlete kind of thing. None of that shallow nonsense. I'm like, dude, they want abs. Go get them abs. Like, let's go. Whatever you're doing this for is your thing. One of the things that will kill motivation more than anything else is trying to pretend that you want something you don't really want, or suppressing something that you do want. And this is something I used to do a whole lot in life in general. Like, that thing is not really that important. I'd be like, yeah, I don't know why anybody would ever want that kind of, car in their garage, or why guys, we used to do this all the time, right? Sometimes, you'd see a hot movie star or something like that, and your girlfriend's like, oh, that, so-and-so, like, who does she think she is? She's ugly. It's like, yeah, she's ugly, all right. Yeah, and of course you're lying to yourself. You're not being true. You're not being authentic about what's getting you ticked and ready to rock and roll. So hell, if abs and striations and big biceps and looks and being hot for the beach is what gets you working out in the gym, awesome. Go for it. And I even addressed this to a large degree in my first book, Fitness Independence, where I talk about how the idea of exercising for the sake of aesthetic augmentation is a bit of a myth, because your body really doesn't change so it can look different. It's only function. But that doesn't mean we can't influence our appearance through exercise. It's certainly possible. But I mentioned that nowadays, a lot of the marketing rhetoric is people are drawn to exercise for the sake of sexification, right? I want to look good naked. Because let's face it, most of us don't need to worry about performance, right? It's like, train like an athlete. Most of us aren't athletes, right? For the longest time, exercise was all about kicking ass and performance and health and all this sort of thing. But the reality is that's almost going to always be a niche thing. But everybody wants to look good naked. Everybody wants to feel strong and confident in their own skin. And if that's what's getting you moving, embrace it. Don't try to hide it. Don't try to gloss it over. Don't say, I want to be functionally fit, when in reality, you want to be sexy as hell. If you want that, go for it. Go after that. Don't try to cover up what's really motivating for you. Another way too, some people are like, I don't care about abs, but I want to be able to kick some serious ass. Well, then go for that. Whatever you want, go for it. Kevin McLaurin. Hey, Matt, How would you recommend me to train my squat chain if my ankle mobility sucks? Should I go back from doing assisted single leg squats to suspended deep squats till I improve my mobility? You could do both. I would engage in a wide range of squatting techniques, including lunges, especially lunges as a matter of fact, because the best way to improve the mobility of the joint is do strength exercises that require and use that mobility. So you're saying, oh, I'm running into this limitation. That's exactly the kind of thing you should be doing. That's exactly the type of exercise you should be doing, is the squats that are challenging that ankle mobility. So deep squats, single leg squats, lunges, whatever kind of exercise you feel is running into that limitation of that ankle mobility, that's what you should be practicing to a large degree. And I recommend practicing it on a daily basis if you can, because mobility is oftentimes enhanced a lot faster if you are doing it a lot more frequently. All right, let's see what else we got. David Baker. Hey, Matt, if you're sore or tired on a given day, should you totally skip out on training or do a lighter type of workout? Do a lighter type of workout. It depends on how sore you are, of course, but movement heals, blood flow heals. That soreness is from inflammation due to basically creating a novel stimulus that your body wasn't really used to and stuff. So sitting and resting and not doing almost anything is probably not going to help you recover quite as quick. So something light, something general, like I was saying, like the shadow boxing and stuff, I always found that if I had sore muscles, going and doing a Taekwondo class took care of it 9 times out of 10. So definitely work and use the muscle. You don't need to necessarily work the muscle, just use it, get the blood flowing through it, and you'll recover all the way quicker. Let's see. Al Painter is mentioning, I always wanted the 1966 Ford Futura Batmobile. I have zero guilt around that. Okay, Al, I just lost all respect for you. Nothing beats the Ramblers from the new Batmans, but I know exactly what you mean. It's funny, when I was a kid, like Knight Rider all the way. I like dreamed when I was like 9 years old. I was like, I want to have, you know, the Trans Am when I grow up and have it talk to me and jump over stuff and everything. Because when you're 9 years old, you think that's all possible. And a couple of years ago, I was in Vegas and they had a museum, cars of the screen and stuff. And they had cars that were on the sets for TV shows and stuff like that, Fast and Furious cars, the A-Team van. And they had like several of the Knight Rider cars. And I was like, this is so cool. My friends were like, this is so stupid. Why are we here? I'm like, shut up. Let my 9-year-old live out his fantasies here for a second. David Baker. Hey, Matt, if you're, I already got that one. Sorry, I misquated to it. Hey, Matt, any experience and or thoughts on Drew Bay's Project Kratos and time static contractions? Nope, no thoughts because I never heard of it. Something now for me to Google. Something to check out. But I appreciate the recommendation. Zantana. Hey, Matt, I've been taking the NASM CPT guided study. Very good. Any tips on studying for the exam? Man, you've got some. So you're swinging for the fences with that. That is not an easy test to pass. I got the ACE certification myself and passed by about that much. You needed a 75 to pass. I got a 77. Got it by the skin of my teeth. Congratulations. The thing with that is it's such a data dump. And studying for certified personal training exams like that, it's just so much information. So it's not so much about the facts so much as the general concepts. So I just highlighted the hell out of the book and I just kept going through my highlights over and over and over. But see if you can find any sort of online like study groups, or if you can Google like basic concepts or key concepts, key information for the NASM exam. Because oftentimes they may say something like, make sure you really understand the concepts of substrate use and human metabolism and stuff like that. Because a lot of times, I don't know about now, because back then, I took that exam nearly 20 years ago. But for me, at least, the exams were trying to go in the direction of practical application, not just fact-based, like, you know, where does the biceps femoris connect and what's its primary action? It's more like functional stuff like, okay, if someone's exercising in this way, what would be a good way for them to recover? So it's kind of more of an understanding of the principles of the information. So I would look online and see if you can find anybody who is mentioning some of those key principles or tactics, and that's something you can focus on and give you a better chance of passing the exam. Best of luck to you, and I hope you pass with flying colors. Zarati Karate's good question here. Awesome question. Hey, Matt, squats or lunges for bigger legs? Hell, both. Squats and lunges should be very much the same thing. This is one of those exercises where I was saying earlier, like, why are you creating a difference in how your muscles are engaging, and why are you using your muscles differently with these two things that should be much more similar? Squats and lunges are definitely examples of that. Your squats and your lunges should be as close to each other in experience and how your legs feel as possible. So if you did a series of squats and then you did a series of lunges, your legs should just be kind of like, oh, this is pretty much the same thing. It's kind of like vanilla ice cream and vanilla ice cream with chocolate chips on it. Yeah, there's some difference there, but really at the base level, it's the same thing. So one of the things you can do is when you're doing your lunges, think of just squatting, alternating squatting. Again, I talked about this in my micro workout video from last Monday. You step forward, squat on that front leg. Then you step up and squat on the next leg, squat on the next. If you squat your lunges, it makes them much more effective. Because a lot of times people are trying to stride their lunges, lunging forward, kind of like a lunging fencer kind of thing. That's not how you want to do that exercise. You want to lunge, you want to squat your lunges. Makes it much safer, a hell of a lot more effective, very satisfying as well. Kevin back again. Thanks, Matt. Yep, I do daily squats now, like you recommend for the ankle good. Always pleasure learning from you. Yeah, I think you're on the right track. I think you're on the right track there, Kevin. And again, a lot of times ankle mobility is mistaken for hip mobility. People oftentimes will say, I lack ankle mobility. It's like, well, actually, it's your hips that are tight. That's usually what holds people back more than anything else, is the glute and the hamstring isn't coming apart in the back of the hip, allowing the depth of your hips to go down. And when that happens, then your knee can actually move forward. But if that doesn't happen, then it's really hard for the knee to track forward more. Again, a lot of people think, oh, my ankles are tight, when it's really actually your hips. So think of hips and ankles, both of which are getting stretched and flexing. And then one, that takes a lot of stress off your knees, but it also helps to alleviate any stiffness you may be feeling in those deeper movements. See, just a couple more here to wrap up. Hey, Matt, enjoyed your review of the IsoFlow. Have you had a chance to play around with the self-resistance dynamic motions? Thought maybe you could do a different dimension of tension control. Yeah, the IsoFlow review, you can check it out on the RDP channel. It's about probably a week old, not even that. But it's a very unique piece of equipment because it allows that sort of self-resistance exercise. I actually met with, I'm going to blank on his name here, but the son of the founder of Bullworker. Because when they sent me the product, I looked at the envelope and I was like, oh, you guys are here in Denver. Let's just meet up kind of thing. And he took me through like an hour-long session of learning how to do it. And he had this neat little quote. He said, the philosophy of Bullworker is control your resistance to control your results. And I really like that idea because oftentimes we make resistance a passive thing. Therefore, our tension control is a passive thing, which is why we usually feel like we're not really that in control of how effective the exercise is. So one of the ways you could do that is, of course, with overcoming isometrics, but also self-resistance, where you're moving, but some part of you is moving in the other direction or applying resistance in the other direction. The IsoFlow is one of the best pieces of equipment to do that because you pull on one side and it's giving resistance to the other side. I haven't experimented with it a whole lot. I did do a little tiny bit of it when I was studying abroad in Japan back in college, but that again was years ago. I had no idea what I was doing. Much like everything else, because I tried isometrics, it didn't work. I tried calisthenics, it didn't work, largely because I had no idea what I was doing. And I'm sure the same thing is probably the same with self-resistance. So I haven't really played with it a whole lot. It just hasn't been part of my repertoire, but it is definitely something I think has a lot more value than people realize. Good shoulder therapy, I will say that, because my right shoulder has always kind of been a little bit wonky. So doing things like the self-resisted Y-flies and stuff like that, very, very good at finding those little areas of weakness that you can really hone in. It's a very interesting discipline. And I think there's a lot more to it than I currently understand. So I need to do a lot more research on it for sure. All right, folks, I am going to check out, get a good night's sleep. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming on. Again, my apologies for the audio thing. I think I figured out what was going on. I was using an adapter that was supposed to enhance the audio, but apparently did not work. So I will talk to you next week. Next week's topic, we're going to be, what was it? We're going to be talking a little bit on things that are not necessarily wasting your time, but are creating a lot of excessive bloat and basically making your workouts cost a heck of a lot more than they really need to. So that's what's coming up next week, same time, 7 p.m. here Wednesday night, standard time here, Mountain Standard Time here in Denver. That is, of course, 9 Eastern and 6 Pacific. But see you guys next week. Till then, be fit and live free.